So you are thinking about buying a house in Georgia and you're clueless about the home buying process. How is it different from where you currently live and where do you begin? We are going to cover all of that today in this video. Hi, I'm Sarah Maslowski and I am a team owner of a fantastic real estate team here serving the North Metro Atlanta area. We make videos on how to move to Georgia and educate you about all of the different areas, the Georgia real estate market, and all the great towns that you can move to. So we are going to cover some of the most commonly asked questions and things that come up when we are helping out-of-state buyers purchase a home in Georgia. So the very first step into buying a house in Georgia is that you need to be working with a really great agent. How in the heck do you find a really great agent? Well, I'm here to tell you. Hopefully, if you are watching this video, you're going to pick up the phone and call my team and I so that we can help you, just like we've helped tens and hundreds of clients across the country move and make Georgia their home. So after you have gotten connected with a really great agent, you are going to want to make sure that you are pre-approved if you are getting a loan. If you have never bought a home before, or even if you have, it's really, really important, and you've seen me talk about this in other videos before, but you need to be pre-approved with a local lender. It is so important whenever you are negotiating and working on getting your offer accepted for a home here in Georgia. These big national lenders are not going to cut it. So make sure that you connect with your local real estate agent that's going to connect you with a really great local lender. My team and I have some fabulous partners that we would love to partner you with whenever you are considering making your move to Georgia. Another thing that is super important that you need to know about, not only getting pre-approved, but you also need to educate yourself about the area. Just simply saying that you want to move to the North Metro Atlanta area is not good enough. We've got to narrow that focus down and find out exactly where you are going to live. Now, for some people, they know exactly where they're going to be because they're moving to be closer to family or they're moving for a specific job. Of course, you're not going to drive 2 hours away, so that gives us an area of focus that we can narrow down and make sure that we are putting you in a really great area close to where you need to be or close to those other family members. But if you have no clue where you want to live, how are we supposed to know? One of the things that we can do is learn a little bit more about you and your family, your likes, your needs, things that are important to you, and we can give you some really great advice on areas that we think are going to really serve those needs that you have. And of course, we've made tons of videos here on this channel educating you about all of these great cities that the North Metro Atlanta has to offer. That's definitely a great resource. Definitely reaching out to us, but for a lot of clients, that's an actual trip into town to kind of explore and get a really good feel of how these towns are, what they look like, what they feel like, what is traffic like, what are the stores, what's the greenery. Those are all things that you can't really get per se from a video, and it's super helpful to do that in person. Another thing that's super important, and I'm sure if you watch my videos, you don't need to worry about this, but you need to be educated about the Georgia real estate market. It could be drastically different from where you're coming from, and it's a great thing to prepare yourself for so that whenever you're house hunting, you have a great understanding of how much we can negotiate, what the current inventory is like, what are the tools that we have in our toolbox to get your offer accepted, do we need to be competitive? Those are all incredibly important things to understand before you get started on your house hunt. So I'm just going to tell it to you up straight that if you're looking for an amazing deal right now in this real estate market, this is not the area that you need to be looking in. I'm sure there's maybe some other great parts of the country that you can find an amazing deal, but unfortunately right now, the way the real estate market is right here in Georgia, it's a very, very, very strong seller's market. We have about a month's supply of inventory on the market, which is incredibly historically low. A normal balanced real estate market, to give you some perspective, is about a 6-month supply of inventory. So we're not going to get huge negotiations for you on behalf of a buyer against a seller in this current climate. So you have gotten your pre-approval, you understand the market, you know where you want to be. The next step is going and seeing houses. But Sarah, what if I can't be there in person to see the houses? Don't worry, we are experts at doing virtual tours, and what does that look like? It's FaceTime, it's walking around the house with the camera, showing you, and let me tell you, we treat this process just like we would if we were selling this house or showing this house to our mom or our sister. We're going to show you the nitty-gritty, we're going to show you the imperfections of the house, we're going to tell you what it smells like, we're going to show you what the street looks like coming up to the house, what what the neighborhood looks like. All of those things are super important because, well, let me tell you, I don't want you falling in love with a house that you really don't love. So I'm gonna be as honest as possible. Our team is gonna be super duper duper honest, show you all the positives and all the negatives when we are showing you a home virtually. Now, obviously virtual is our second option. We would much prefer you to come in on a house hunting trip so that we can show you those houses in person. However, for a lot of our clients, it's just not simply possible. Most of that has to be done through that virtual process. So after we have found the home that you have absolutely fallen in love with, now it's time to make a very strong offer so that we can get you under contract. So we make that really strong offer, we do some great negotiations for you, and we get you that house under contract. What exactly are the parts of a contract here in Georgia? All right, let's dig into it. The first thing outside of price that is very important is the closing date. So in Georgia, we can close loans in as little as 10 to 14 days if you're purchasing in cash, or a typical closing time frame is about 30 days. No more, no less. So if you're coming from a state where that time process is a little bit longer, that is a very, very important difference that you should know, is that in Georgia, that process is 30 days. So be prepared to sign all your paperwork and pick up the keys to your house in 30 days. Now, of course, this could be negotiated a little bit differently. If it's really important to the seller to have a longer closing and we have the ability to push that out, of course, that's something that we can push out and do. Same thing about bringing it forward a little bit. We can move that date up. That is part of the negotiations when we are working with the seller to make a really attractive offer, and it's part of our job that our team is reaching out to their agent to find what is most important to that seller in making an offer. Now, we have the closing date. The next part is the earnest money. So earnest money is money that you turn in once a contract is accepted. It's a gesture of good faith that shows that you are serious about moving forward with purchasing this house. Typically, it's about 2% of the purchase price, but in competitive, strong seller's market like we are right now, the more that money can be, the better. So it's typically about 2% of the purchase price, and that money is turned in once we go binding on a contract. Once all parties have agreed, you submit that money either to the real estate company, or it's held with the closing attorney depending upon the amount of that money. And we'll get into that closing process here in just a little bit. So we're under contract. We turn in the earnest money. The next part comes the due diligence period of the contract. Now, this is a negotiable amount of time in the contract, and in a normal market, it's 7 to 14 days. This is the time period that you have as a buyer to do all the inspections that you want to do on a home. In Georgia, during this time period, you as a buyer can back out of the contract for any reason. You can simply wake up the next day after going under contract and changing your mind, getting cold feet, and backing out. You can decide that you're not going to move here anymore. All sorts of reasons people back out of a contract during due diligence. It does not have to be because you discovered something during a home inspection. You do not have to give a reason to terminate that contract so long as it's in the due diligence time period. Now, put yourself in the seller's shoes. This is a very, very scary time of the contract. You're just kind of sitting there holding your breath, waiting to find out, is this contract going to move forward or not? So, as you can imagine, because it's such a strong seller's market right now, sellers want that due diligence time period to be as short as possible. So, in today's market right now, that period's between like 3 to 7 days. So, for a lot of our clients, if you are doing a virtual tour, once we have you under contract, you are then flying out or driving in to see your home for the very first time during that due diligence period. This gives us a little bit of a layer of protection so that if you get here in person and you hate it, we can terminate that contract and you get your earnest money back. That goes back to you as the buyer. So that's why that time period is so important to the contract. That's why it's important to keep it short for the seller, and it's why it's important that we have enough time negotiated in there so that we can make sure that we can accommodate your travel schedule as well. When it comes time for inspections, we have excellent vendor partners that we work with that can get us in as quickly as the next day if we need to. So that part is not really as important in the due diligence time period. What's most important is that we can get an acceptable due diligence period under contract, and we can get you in town to see the house in person if that's the first time that you are in town. Let's say that you saw the house in person, you put a contract on it, and then you're flying back or driving back to where you are moving from during that due diligence period. Don't worry. We are going to be present at that home inspection and be your eyes and ears on the ground. That home inspector is going to give us a really, really great in-depth overview of the house, and we're going to take care of you there. So don't worry if you can't be here in person. So once we make it through the due diligence period, we've negotiated any repairs of anything scary that may come up, we are on to the next step. And for most people in a contract, that is your appraisal contingency time frame. Again, this is another time frame that is negotiable in the state of Georgia. We put it into the contract. Typically, it's somewhere between 14 and 21 days. This is the time period that the bank has to get the appraiser out to the house and evaluate the actual value of the home. Now, again, in today's market, sometimes you may be advised, and that might be something we'll have deep discussions about, whether or not we want to waive that appraisal contingency. But if you have an appraisal contingency in place, if the home does not appraise for at least the list price of the house or what we are currently under contract for, you as a buyer have the right to legally say, I want out of this contract. You also have the right to go back to the seller and attempt to negotiate that price down to the appraised value. Now, I'll give you an example. Right now in this really, really strong seller's market, when you are competing against 5 and 10 other offers, if that appraisal comes back low, let's just say $10,000 less, that seller's not willing to come down because heck, they had, 5 to 10 other people that wanted to buy that house. Chances are there's someone that's willing to pay that additional money in order to make the deal go forward. This is something that we'll have more in-depth conversations about, but just know that if you have an appraisal contingency in place, there are protections for you in there as a buyer to legally terminate the contract and get that earnest money back, or you can negotiate with the seller to an agreeable terms. But either way, you have an out in the contract during that appraisal contingency. So this appraisal contingency time period usually kind of expires about a week before closing. So what does a closing process look like here in Georgia? Well, your lender is working on preparing all of the loan documents, and they are providing that to a closing attorney. In the state of Georgia, all of the title work, all of the closing paperwork is done with a closing attorney. And so in some states like Florida or California, you have like an escrow agent or a title company. Here in Georgia, we use closing attorneys, and that is who handles the entire process. So while your lender is working on getting all of your loan documents finalized, the closing attorney is working on preparing and getting all of the title documents and making sure that legally the seller has the right to sell the house to you. There's no liens on the house or anything like that. Now, the day prior to closing on your house, that is the time period when you are going to deposit and transfer the money of the remaining down payment that is needed for the lender to close on the house. Now, in the state of California, you do that much earlier in the process where that's held with the escrow agent. Here in Georgia, you don't do that final transfer of your remaining down payment funds needed to close until the day before, or sometimes even the day of closing. So the closing process, you go to the closing attorney's office. There are options to do this either remotely or virtually. We can even do mail away closings. All of that's possible, but for the most part in traditional closing, both parties come to the closing attorney's office. We sit across the table from one another and we have fun signing a bunch of papers for about an hour, especially if there is a loan involved. During this process, once the closing attorney has the incomplete loan documents, everything signed, they're going to send that off to the loan company and they're going to get that final approval for funding on the loan. Now, some lenders even do this part ahead of time so that you don't have to wait. But typically this process takes about an hour. Once that closing attorney has that final funding approval from the lender, that means they have the money from the mortgage company in hand, then they can then transfer off to the seller. closing is complete and the house is sold. All the I's have been dotted and the T's have been crossed, and now the house is yours. So this is the time period when the keys are exchanged and you get to go to your house. So for a lot of our clients, some of this is surprising. They think that they're not going to get the keys to their house that same day that they close, and you do, which is very exciting. So as soon as we finish signing those paperworks and the money is there from the lender, the house is yours. Now, of course, if you are paying in cash, that money will already be there because you'll have completed that wire. That closing process is a little bit shorter because you're not having to sign all of those loan documents. So it's a much shorter process, but either way, keys and possession is handed over typically at closing unless something different has been negotiated. Now, one final important thing that does happen right before closing, usually the exact same day, is a few hours before closing, we and my team and I are going to go to the house with you and we are going to do what we call a final walkthrough. This is our last time to lay eyes on the house to make sure that everything has been done, that we have negotiated from the seller. It's also our opportunity to make sure that a storm didn't come through and, you know, there's not like a branch that's crashed through the ceiling or a water pipe that's burst and now there's a big leak in the basement. This is our final opportunity to lay eyes on the house and to bring up any final grievances if we have any and get those negotiated with the seller prior to closing. Typically, this is a very easy process. It's a very quick thing. It's a very exciting time period where we get to see the house for one final time before you go and sign all those papers and get the keys. So typically this whole entire process only takes about 30 days and it can move much quicker if you have the ability in place to move faster when it comes to funding loan options and whether or not you are paying in cash. Either way, my team and I are so excited and we love helping people from all across the country move here. So if you're thinking about making a move to anywhere in Georgia, make sure you reach out to my team. Our contact information is below. Now, of course, you have to check out these videos on these towns if you are considering making a move here to Georgia.